Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I actually recognize this staircase as I'm standing out here from some of the press conferences after the election. And it's kind of humbling to be like, oh, yeah, there were some very big things that happened at that moment right here in a really important state. So if you'd have told me, Adam Kinzinger of 3 years ago, that you're going to be endorsing a Democrat for president in 3 years, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I would have been like, what? This has got to be a different Adam Kinzinger. It can't be me. But I got to tell you, the stakes of this moment are way too high. As you all know, I officially endorsed President Biden today, and it's very simple why. So if I look at two things, number one, who's going to fight for people and who's going to fight for himself? I think there is nobody that believes that Donald Trump is more of a person committed to this country and to doing things for others than Joe Biden is. Joe Biden has made it clear that even when we disagree, and there are things that I disagree with the president on, he's going to put the interest of the country and the interest of the people of the country above his own interests. What does Donald Trump do? Well, Donald Trump, at the beginning of every one of his rallies, has the January 6th people that have been detained sing the national anthem. He calls them the January 6th hostages. And by the way, he only started using that term after October 7th, when the term hostages were being used in another capacity. But I look at this and say, why is it that, what is so important about this election, even beyond who's fighting for themselves and who's fighting for the country? And the reality is because there is a fight for democracy that if we don't buckle down and take seriously, we could easily lose that fight for democracy. The former president convinced a significant amount of the American people that an election was stolen. And in a self-governing society, in my time in Congress, I spent a lot of time traveling around to countries that were failing or countries that had struggling democracies. And one of the things that was in common is if you believe that your vote doesn't count or your voice hasn't been heard, democracies fail, because that's your voice in a democracy. Every 2 years, you get a chance to have your voice heard. The former president convinced a significant amount of the American people that the system was rigged, that he won. And what did we see as a result of that? We saw a mob launched by the former president on the Capitol of the United States. I didn't watch that on TV. I lived it. Harry lived it. We were there when a mob of angry people that believed from the former president that their voice wasn't heard made a decision to attack the Capitol. Now, it would be one thing if in the past, if after that, the Republican Party and the former president would have taken accountability for what happened. If he'd have said, this got out of control, this never should have been that. But what do we have instead? From the Republicans, we have denial, we have conspiracies, we have lies, and we have scoffing. I watched a former colleague of mine just about an hour or two ago on television kind of chuckle when he was asked about the question of democracy and does democracy matter. He goes, people aren't going to vote on the issue of democracy. Somebody has to. Somebody has to defend it. Somebody has to stand strong. And I've got to tell you, in November, there is one man running for re-election, of two men running for re-election, that cares about the future of this country and cares about democracy, and that's Joe Biden. And if we have things we disagree on, that's fine. We have things in this country we're going to disagree on for the next 100 years that we may not even be able to solve. But if we don't have our democracy, we won't have the luxury to disagree on those things. I've got a 2.5-year-old son that deserves to be raised in a strong country like I got to be raised in. That generation has every right to have their voice heard, to have a strong democracy, to be in a country they can be proud of and not have a leader intent on dividing and destroying the American people to turn them against each other for his own selfish gain. And guess what? His kids have a right to that too. And my kids' grandkids have a right to that. And only if we stand strong today and talk about the importance of defending our democracy. And sometimes that means taking somebody and endorsing them that you didn't think you'd endorse 3 years ago. But I tell you what, I am proud to stand up here today as a conservative Republican and endorse Joe Biden for re-election to President of the United States. And I'm also honored to stand up here with the leader. I'm honored to stand up here with Harry Dunn, and I'm honored to stand up here with your former Lieutenant Governor, a great friend of mine, and also a very strong conservative who knows the stakes here, Jeff Duncan. Jeff.